Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacqueline. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Yes, the doctor's in. Welcome to USA Global TV, and hello to our friends listening on Business Talk Radio. I am Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, and our show today is Talking Heads. This is our third Talking Heads show today, which is so exciting. If you're joining us for the first time, get ready to be educated. This is a platform where experts from around the world come and share their expertise and knowledge in a 30-minute show, which is all about them presenting to you to help make you and me, all of us, better personally and or professionally. Our expert talking head presenter today is Mariska du Preez, joining us from New Zealand. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello, good to see you.
I am honored to be back.
Well, I'm excited that you're talking about emotional intelligence, correct?
Yes. We are looking at emotional intelligence today. So we started last week a little bit just with an overview, and we are digging a little deeper today. So very exciting.
Yay! All right, something that we all need to learn more about. I'm going to go backstage. Yep. Would you like your presentation deck up now, or?
Yes, please. Yes. That would be great.
All right. Have a great presentation.
Thank you. Okay, so in this lesson, we are looking at emotional intelligence, and more specifically, emotional intelligence applied to ourselves. So an overview of some of the lessons that we have done so far. So we started off with awareness, having a look at awareness and the different components that awareness consists of. And then we came to the conclusion that emotional intelligence actually takes up quite a chunk of our awareness. So we delved into an overview of emotional intelligence in our previous lesson. And in this lesson, we are going to delve deeper into the internal aspect of emotional intelligence. So why is this important? According to David, this is very important to understand that our emotional intelligence is not the opposite of intellectual intelligence. So our cognitive intelligence, it is not a triumph of heart over head. It is more an integration of the two. And that is something that we always need to keep front of mind. So when we are in our daily lives during decision making, or maybe we are just interacting with people, communicating, in all those different elements of life, emotional intelligence helps us, as well as our cognitive intelligence. That would also help us throughout our day. So this is really integrating the two and not just having the one and the other one, really making them one. So here's a question for you guys, a little quiz. You did not have to study for this, so we will see how your general knowledge go. How much of your success do you think you can attribute to emotional intelligence? Is it 50%? Do you think maybe it's more 95% or around the 80 percentiles? So if you said C, 80%, that would be the most correct one, as research is now seeing more and more that in our interactions, emotional intelligence is a really, really key element for us to not only understand, but also being able to work with it. And that's what we are going to look at then today. So when we think about our own emotional intelligence and how we work with our emotions, there's 4 different places that we focus on. So we focus on identifying the emotions, then using those emotions, understanding the emotions, and regulating our emotions. So that's the 4 main elements of emotional intelligence when we look at it from an internal, personal sort of perspective. Now, breaking these down just a little bit more, when we're identifying, what do we mean by identifying emotions? So in our previous lesson, we had a nice wheel that showed all the emotions. You guys can go back to that lesson to check out the wheel. But it's really about naming the emotion. So whatever emotion is coming up, am I able to name this emotion that I'm feeling? Sometimes we feel things and we're not quite sure what sort of emotion it might be. And the wheel might be something useful, a useful tool for us to see what is it that we are feeling. And then how is that feeling also showing up for us? Are there certain behaviors that we are exhibiting, or maybe we might be showing it in our bodies a certain way, our facial expressions, feeling our hands. When we get angry, we clench our fists, all sorts of different things that might be showing up in our bodies or for us when we are experiencing these emotions. So identifying it in the body itself and looking at how we behave and our body, as well as naming it. Then using our emotions, what we basically do is we look at the patterns, the current ones that we have, and then the ones that we would preferably want to have. Understanding our emotions, this is more about the links that we make, and then regulating our emotions. Of course, this is whether we are feeling this emotion. Is it something that we want to bring into the world at this present moment? Is it going to serve us, or may it maybe not serve us? So having those expressions come out into the world that we live in. So let's dive deeper into each of these. When we look at identifying, here is 5 easy steps that you can utilize to help you identify your emotions. So firstly, notice them, right? Just become aware of them, notice them, and then see whether you can name the emotion. If we are able to name the emotion, it makes it a little bit easier for us to identify them next time when they come up. Then, of course, track each emotion. Almost try and track them on their own. So when you are feeling an emotion, identify it, name it, and then see how they show up. Try and track them. Sometimes with some emotions, it is quite intricate and they can blend the one into the other. So one of the elements of the tracking and the noticing and the naming is also to notice the energy behind the emotion. So how much energy is in that emotion? Is it a lot of energy or just a little bit of energy? And if it's a lot of energy, do you have one name for it? And if it's just a little bit of energy, do you have maybe a different name for it? So when I am really upset, I can go into angry. But when I'm just a little upset, maybe I feel annoyed. So looking at those type of aspects of it as well when we're doing the naming and the tracking. Then, as I said, learning the different words for the emotions. So depending on the intensity of the emotion might have a different name or a different word that relates better to that emotion. And then, if you are a person that enjoys recording, you can have a journal or you can make a list of your emotions or whatever way of recording you prefer. And the reason for the recording will become a little bit more apparent in our next slide. recording is a really useful tool for us to actually see what is happening with our emotions and to see what is coming up maybe more frequently. And then also notice your emotions that you have when you look at art, or when you're watching a movie, or maybe when you're even reading a book, or walking in nature, right? All the different places that you interact with, things that you see around you. People, we all put our emotions into things. I know my husband has mentioned many a time that when I am upset, I should please not cook. And the reason why he doesn't want me to make any food when I'm upset is it doesn't taste really great, right? So preferably I need to be in a good mood and happy, and then the food is really tasty and he enjoys it. When I'm not so happy, I will most probably not put as much effort into it, and it might not taste as good. This shows up in different areas for different people, and we bring it into our daily lives, whether we realize it or not. So noticing these places where emotions are interacting with our space is a great way for us also to be able to name it. And then coming to the next part, actually looking at the patterns. So when we want to use our emotions, we need to at least see a pattern. And when we have no idea what's going on, we have no awareness of our emotions, it might feel a little bit like the slide. It's just dots and squiggles everywhere, and we're not sure exactly how they will relate to one another. We have no idea. It just looks like a big mess. But then, when we start to look a little bit closer, we might see, hey, there's a little bit of a pattern forming here. And then once we have noticed the pattern, something interesting happens. Our brain actually notices more of exactly the same pattern popping up all over the place. So this also happens for us in our emotions, right? So we will have certain interactions and certain emotions will come up time and time again. So when we are aware of them and we can see these patterns happening, it becomes a lot easier to sort of notice, hey, I'm going into this pattern again. I'm going to feel these emotions again. And that, of course, then helps us to have a bit of a pattern exchange, because it might be that the pattern is okay and we're all happy with it, or we might not be so happy with it and we want to change our pattern. And this is where the next section comes in then. To change our pattern, what we need to do is actually look at the structure that we have. So thinking about the slide with the wee little patterns that we have identified, there is a structure around each one of those. So the patterns that we're displaying at the moment, there's some way that we have linked certain emotions to certain people, events, words, values. So we link emotions to most everything in our life. And because we have these links, we build a little structure. And once that thing happens, the emotion just comes with it because it's attached, right? So what we need to start doing is to identify what's the structure that we have and which emotions did we attach to that structure. Now, once we know that, it's easier to be able to remove the things that we don't want, or to accept it or mitigate for it. So depending on what it is that your intention is for that structure and how it is that you want to come across in your communication or within the space that you are currently in. So looking at that structure, a good example of this is, for instance, when I say fire. Now, when I say fire, Some people might think of fire engines, which makes them think of vehicles, which makes them think of racing cars, which makes them think of sport, which make them think of Saturday evenings out with friends and fun. Right. That might be a pathway that they have connected in their mind when we say fire. So for them, fire is not a big problem. They actually can also relate it to Saturday night with friends, and it might be bonfires and parties and stuff like that. On the other hand, if I say fire, another person might think, oh, fire, house. My house might burn down. They might have had an experience where they had a fire that caused damage for them, right? So this already created a link. And because of that link, we can also see how that emotion will then be attached to that word or that concept. And this is what I mean by structures. So we have different emotions that's connected to different structures and different pictures in our mind. So knowing, for us to know what they are and how they work, will also help us then to change them into something that we feel that actually serves us better. And that, of course, brings us to our regulation, right? Regulating our emotions. So when we know the structure, we know the emotion that's showing up, we can now decide, okay, I am in this situation. Normally my pattern looks like this, and I don't really want to have it looking like this. I want to change it to that because I want this type of outcome. And because of the outcome that I'm after, normally the outcome that I get isn't great. So my pattern isn't the greatest. So my outcome, I want to change that, but I need to change my pattern for it. So once I have changed my pattern, I can actually respond in a way that serves me better. And this is what regulation is about. Regulation is about being able to use our emotion to serve us in a way that we want it to serve us. We will still get upset. We will still get sad. So those emotions, any emotion, is not good or bad. It depends on what we do with them. So they all show us something. They show us the structures that we have. They show us the patterns that we have. And with these, they also then show us, hey, this is what I'm creating at the moment. Maybe I can change it into something different. That I can create something that's more in line with the way I want to be living and interacting with the people around me at work and at home. So these elements of it all sort of slowly go down to our regulation, where we can decide this is the way that we want to actually show up in the world and interact with people around us. And these are the emotions that would serve us best in each and every situation. And so we can sort of see how emotion is actually helping us to create the success that we want. Because if we're just going to let them run rampant and do whatever they want, of course it's going to create a problem for us because we are not in charge of what's happening. We have structures that we don't know how they look like. We have patterns that looks like a big mess because we've never sat down to actually figure out what the hell is going on. And it shows up in our life creating chaos. Whereas if we know what our patterns are, if we know how our structures are working and how they are set up and how our values and our strengths are actually helping us, then we can start regulating our emotions a lot better, showing up the way that we want to be showing up. So in a bit of a summary, for emotional intelligence, we have the internal and, as we mentioned in our previous video, the external elements of it. So for today, we went through the internal, identifying our own emotions, using our own emotions, understanding those emotions, and then regulating those emotions. So for our next video, we'll be going through the external elements of it, and that would be identifying other people's emotions, seeing how others use their emotions and how they show up for them, using or understanding other people's emotions and how they are showing up so we know what to be doing, and then of course regulating our response to those emotions. And then the very last quote that I would love to leave you guys with is, in emotional intelligence is a way of recognizing, understanding, and choosing how we think and feel and act. It shapes our interactions with others and our understanding of ourselves. It defines how and when we learn. It allows us to set priorities. It determines the majority of our daily actions. And we saw all of these during the lesson that we just went through. So I would love to hear from you guys what you are finding within your emotional intelligence space and how these few tips and tricks are helping you to become more aware and implementing some of these emotional intelligent hacks. So you can contact me either on my email, which is mariska@journeytodiscover.com, or we can connect on LinkedIn. You can also find me at my website, which is journeytodiscover.com, and the 2 is the number 2.
Great lesson. I'm still visualizing you in the kitchen cooking and your husband going, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Does the food really turn out that badly?
Yeah. Yeah, I have had numerous times when he would actually these days, if he sees that my mood isn't great, he will say, hey, can we get takeout tonight? Yeah, okay, that's fine. I get it. It seems like I feel a little bit tired or under the weather. Works for me too.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like for what you're saying today, the internal piece, that emotional intelligence is being aware of how you're showing up and how you're reacting to things. And then what are you going to do about that? So when your husband shares with you that you're showing up like this, and that's going to be reflected in the taste of the food, that how do you break that pattern? And you break it by doing something different instead of continuing to cook and go, I'm going to cook anyway, whatever, so you don't sound like that, I'm sure, but
well, I'm not so sure. Maybe in his head, maybe sometimes I do.
Well, it's interesting. Most of the work that I do in communicating with people is not specifically on the phone, but it's through email, text, messenger, WhatsApp,
Yes.
etc. And I will find if something happens and I feel a little off, that I better not pick up the phone or the computer to communicate, because it's going to be reflected even though you don't hear my voice. So I break my own pattern by being aware of it.
That is really great observation. And our emotions, and this is one of the reasons why knowing the words for the emotions are so critical, because our emotions comes through in our writing. So when we write an email, we can actually, the listeners can go and do a little bit of an audit on their emails, right? Have a look at your emails that you've sent out in the last week or 2 weeks, and go and have a look. How many emotional words do you find in there? And if you don't find any emotional words, that can also be an indication for other people because they don't really know how you're feeling. And it feels very clinical, which can also become a problem.
Yes, that's definitely the case. And I think with the technology advancements where you can actually use the microphone and it's not recording your voice, but it's taking your words and Siri's typing it, for example, many times, because I was doing that a lot as I was out on my walks, I would just respond to someone. And when I looked back on it later, I thought, oh no, this doesn't reflect what I wanted to come across. It just, I don't know, it doesn't come across right. So we have to be careful about what we type, and is it a reflection of what we mean? Because are we too emotional? Maybe we need to take a step back and break that pattern of not reacting right away to send something out.
Yes.
Or is there no emotion and you sound like a robot?
Exactly. There's very good research that they did, and this is more on facial expressions. So the research that they did was with babies, and the mother will interact with the baby, normally talk to the child, and the child would be pointing and giggling and doing all the things that children normally does. And then the mom will have a still face. So this is sort of that unemotional email, right? Having a still face. And it upset the child. They actually started crying because they're not getting any response back. So yes, having an over-emotional response in our emails and our written language can be a problem, but so can also be a very sterile one, because we're communicating information, wonderful, but we're not necessarily communicating the emotion. So the urgency might not be understood, or the importance of the thing might not be understood. So those emotional words are very key, even within our business communication.
That is so true. And we have a couple of minutes left. I'd love to have your take on this. I was in sales for my whole career and selling multi-million-dollar projects. And when you would meet with the decision maker, or you have the phone call after they meet with the board and this group and that group, sometimes people will give away what their answer is almost immediately. Hey, I'm really glad to see you. And I looked at your proposal, unfortunately. And then you're like, oh, here it is, right? And then other times I noticed that certain people are able to make you feel like you're valid and what you presented to them has worth and meaning, and that they get it. And that now is not going to be a time where we're going to be working together. But I would find myself still engaged. Whereas in the first way of presenting, I would check out, because now you're like, oh, I didn't get the sale. What am I going to tell my boss? What am I going to do? But in the second case, still not getting the sale, but realizing that they see the value of me, my company, what we're presenting. So I think that it is an art. I think emotional intelligence and the way we communicate takes work, and it takes an analysis of how we're showing up internally. And I know next week you're going to look at the external.
Yes, and it is a blend of both of them, because we need to know how we show up and how other people are showing up. So if we can regulate our own emotions, that's a very great first step. And we also need to be able to, when someone else is showing up and they might be feeling deflated, or there might be something going on for them, being able to recognize that. And say, for instance, it is a sales conversation, right? And the person comes in and you notice this person is looking a little bit, they're not themselves. They look a bit down. You're not exactly sure what's going on, but there's a sense of this person is looking a little bit down. Going to them and saying, hey, it seems like you're feeling not yourself today. Is this still a good time for us to have this conversation? And they might say, you know what? I just got the worst news. And after this meeting, I need to rush home so I can get stuff sorted out. For them, it might be a blessing that you noticed the emotion and said something about it. Otherwise, they would have sat through the presentation, right? They would have been annoyed, and not necessarily at the presentation. They were more annoyed because they were sitting there and they couldn't go where they wanted to go to get stuff sorted out. And you have really served yourself and them in the process of noticing that emotion and bringing it up.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And one of our talking heads, Roland Friedel, he presented yesterday about how to run effective team meetings. And I think what you're saying and what he was saying really go nicely together, which just gave me an idea, which I'll talk to you about later. Anyway, what I'm envisioning is to have an effective team meeting. If you're in the leadership role and you're acting as a leader and then subsequently as a coach, that when you start off a meeting with bad news, whether it's in person or it's, that dreaded Monday morning meeting, well, we got to go through the numbers and nobody's hitting their numbers, or we're not where we were last quarter, people immediately tune out. Right. And then the rest of the meeting is probably just not going to be as effective, because I feel like that's using emotional intelligence to, first of all, connect with people and see where they are, especially on a Monday when people are coming in from a weekend. Connect with them and then slowly bring the information out so that people can accept it instead of throwing it at them as soon as they get into the meeting. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. It's interesting. As we're progressing through our awareness series, we'll get to feedback. So feedback is the very last lesson that we have in this series. And setting up our space in order to give feedback, not only in the right way, but in a way that it is easier for the other people to accept it and to actually do something productive with it. Because that's the reason why we give feedback, right? I mean, if we're going to discuss numbers, why are we discussing the numbers? Just so that everybody knows what the numbers are and they feel bad about it?
Right.
No.
Right.
It's not why we're discussing the numbers. We're trying to create something, and that the numbers is an indication. It's a matrix for us to use. So understanding what we're doing and how we're doing it to get the best results is so important. And using our emotional intelligence, as you said, first thing on a Monday morning, not too sure whether that's the greatest plan.
And why are the sales meetings always on a Monday morning? I could never figure that out.
I have no idea. I would love you to ask your boss, or ex-boss rather.
My ex-boss. We should talk about that on the leadership show also. And for people who don't know, let me just share this graphic. This is our show together. Mariska and I have the show Leadership of the Heart, and it's Mondays at 4 p.m. Eastern time. What time is it in New Zealand when we have this show?
It is at the moment 9 a.m. and in April it would be 8 a.m.
8 a.m. Okay. And what are we talking to people about on the show?
So on the show, we are discussing leadership and really looking at leadership from a little bit of a different perspective. So we know that leadership has changed quite a bit, especially recently, and looking at what would really serve us, not only as individuals, but also as organizations and as communities within the leadership space, because the better we have our leaders, the better we can all go in a place where we can create fully to our full potential.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that with our audience, Mariska. And for people who did not see the banner, this is the information to contact Mariska. You can contact her at her website, journey2discover.com, or you can email her at mariska@journey2discover.com. All right, that concludes our show for today. I'll have a quick chat with you about an idea if you have a second. And
I do.
all right, perfect. I'll be backstage in a minute. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it. I want to close out with a beautiful clip that is a tribute to the people of Ukraine. You'll see what I mean after you start watching. You might need a Kleenex or two. It's really powerful. It's violinists from across the world coming together. I think there are 94 violinists from across the world, and I just have to play this. It means so much.